In the dim glow of a sleek, glass-walled boardroom perched high above the bustling city, Edward Grayson, the CEO of Grayson Enterprises, leaned back in his leather chair. The city lights twinkled behind him like scattered diamonds, casting long shadows across the room. He adjusted his gold cufflinks, a sly smile playing on his lips as he addressed the room full of his executives. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and commanding, "today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Grayson Enterprises. Our expansion into international markets will secure our position as the most formidable force in the industry." Applause erupted, but one pair of hands clapped slower than the rest. It was Rachel, the company's CFO. Her sharp green eyes glinted with something that wasn't admiration, a hint of defiance, perhaps. Edward caught her gaze for a fleeting second, his smile faltering before he recovered. He knew Rachel was ambitious, but she had always been loyal. Or so he thought. As the meeting adjourned, the executives filed out, their chatter filling the hallway. Edward lingered, pouring himself a glass of scotch from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. He savored the first sip, relishing the silence, until Rachel's voice broke it. "Edward," she said, stepping back into the room. Her tone was casual, but the edge in her voice was unmistakable. "A moment?" Edward turned, the amber liquid swirling in his glass. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I've been going through the numbers," Rachel began, closing the door behind her. "And there's something unusual." Edward's smile didn't waver, but his grip on the glass tightened. "Unusual?" Rachel stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. "The offshore accounts. The discrepancies in the project budgets. It's all there if you know where to look." For a moment, the room seemed to shrink, the air thick with tension. Edward's mind raced. Had he been careless? No, he had covered his tracks meticulously. Yet Rachel stood there, her expression calm but unyielding, like a predator sizing up her prey. "Rachel," he said smoothly, setting his glass down. "You've always been thorough. I'm sure there's an explanation for whatever you've found. Why don't we go over it together?" She tilted her head, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Oh, I intend to. But not with you." Edward's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. She placed it on the table, sliding it toward him. "This is everything. Documentation, transactions, even a few emails you probably thought were deleted. It's enough to bring the entire company down." Edward's eyes darted to the envelope, then back to Rachel. "And what do you want?" he asked, his voice low. "To see you fall," she replied, her tone icy. "For years, I watched you manipulate and deceive everyone around you. The power plays, the lies, the backstabbing. It ends tonight." Edward's mind raced. He could deny it, threaten her, even try to buy her silence. But Rachel had always been smarter than the rest. She wouldn't have come to him unless she was already a step ahead. "You've made a mistake," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "If you think you can take me down, you're gravely mistaken." Rachel's smirk widened. "Oh, Edward. The game is over. You just haven't realized it yet." She turned and walked out, leaving Edward standing there, his world teetering on the edge of collapse. The next morning, the headlines hit like a bombshell. Grayson Enterprises CEO under investigation for financial fraud. News outlets swarmed the company's headquarters, reporters clamoring for a statement. Edward watched from his office window, his jaw clenched as the chaos unfolded below. Inside, the boardroom was a battlefield. The executives who had once applauded him now demanded answers. Rachel sat at the head of the table, calm and composed, as she presented the evidence. One by one, the board members turned against Edward, their voices rising in anger and betrayal. Edward fought back, denying the allegations, accusing Rachel of fabricating the evidence. But deep down, he knew it was over. She had outmaneuvered him at every turn. By the end of the day, Edward was escorted out of the building, his face plastered across every screen in the city. His empire had crumbled, his reputation shattered. And Rachel? She was hailed as a hero, the whistleblower who had taken down a corrupt CEO. But as she stood in the boardroom that night, staring out at the city lights, a shadow of doubt crossed her face. She had won, yes. But at what cost? The company was in turmoil, its future uncertain. And Edward, he wouldn't go down quietly. Months passed, and the dust began to settle. Rachel took the helm of Grayson Enterprises, steering it through the storm. But the feeling of unease never left her. She knew Edward was still out there, plotting his revenge. One evening, as she worked late in her office, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. "You think you've won. But the game is far from over." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She looked around the empty office, her pulse quickening. The city lights twinkled outside, but the shadows seemed darker than before. And so, the story of Edward Grayson and Rachel continued, a tale of betrayal, ambition, and revenge that would leave no one untouched. For more stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, subscribe to our channel, Behind the Tape. The next twist might be closer than you think.